I worked inside of Zionist organizations. I regret my ignorance. I shouldn't say I regret that I worked there, because I actually believe that God put me there for a reason, because I had to see it from the inside, and I can give people now clarity on how these things work. Clarity on how these things work. Clarity on how these things work.
Are you still Team Trump?
No.
Epstein?
Get out of here.
That
was it. That was like goodbye.
Like,
I do not go halfway with defending pedophiles. Goodbye.
So how would you define yourself? Because now I'm completely disenfranchised. I cannot say myself I'm
disenfranchised. I'm disenfranchised, and I love how they abuse me. Talk about going back to your narcissistic abuse. They literally are like, F you can't get into a country, you can't get back onto a stage, we're going to make sure you can never speak anywhere. And then they're like, why isn't she telling people to vote for she's got the number one podcast. Why aren't you telling people to vote? Are you out of your minds? I hate all of you. I think you guys are all a part of the same demonic entity. Your God is Satan. You guys are Baal worshipers. You will continue to kill and sacrifice children until you feel that demon rewards you. And I stand against
Candace,
you.
You're intense.
Yeah, this is how I feel about these people.
Intense.
They are satanic, right and left at the top.
What is the Synagogue of Satan? What is Baal worship? Candace Owens has been on a roll for over a year regarding the 1948ers who are called Jews or Jewish. She and others are clear with referring to this group of people as the Synagogue of Satan, according to the book of Revelation, chapter 2, verse 9, and chapter 3, verse 9. Listen closely as she comes clean with how she was deceived by exposing the 1948ers playbook of indoctrination that she and Charlie Kirk were subjected to.
No, it is upside down land, but I think it's being fixed and it's being corrected. And like I said, it's in large part due to people learning the pressure that Charlie was under. And this was a person who was evangelical. He was a Zionist. He truly, and I know that you have an opinion about Charlie and the stuff that he was doing, but I can tell you that Charlie was genuine. In the same way that I always say to people, I obviously regret that I worked inside of Zionist organizations. I regret my ignorance. I shouldn't say I regret that I worked there, because I actually believe that God put me there for a reason, because I had to see it from the inside, and I can give people now clarity on how these things work. But I regret that I was ignorant about what was happening in Gaza. And I think people should know that Charlie, me, we were genuine in our support for Israel, because we genuinely believed we were being told the truth by our friends.
Speaking of pedophilia, suppose a man says, I view animated child porn. So there's no real victim in that sense of child pornography, which we both agree is horrendous. And by viewing animated child porn, it prevents me from acting out sexually on a child. Now, I deny that. I think that pornography inflames us to then want to act those fantasies out, and I think there's good studies that back that up. But surely you wouldn't say to the man who views animated child pornography, that's not bad so long as you don't act it out. Wouldn't you want to help this poor sick dude?
Yes, I would, but I'm thrilled that he's not acting it out. I mean,
agreed.
Okay,
of course.
Well, that's big.
Yeah.
We're both thrilled that he might have a poor substitute, but it is a substitute if that were the case. No child is being used. Yeah. It's all animated.
Yeah.
And he
but would you use the word evil of animated child pornography? Because I certainly would.
No, I would use evil only with behavior. That's where we might differ, forgetting the sex issue. You can't be evil. You didn't do evil if you thought evil. You did evil if you committed.
If I'm masturbating to animated pictures of pornography, I'm not doing something evil.
That's correct.
Yeah, I think that's despicable. Yeah.
Really?
Yes, of course.
Who is being hurt? You have to have a victim.
Oh, I'll tell you, there's at least two people being hurt. There's the person who's poisoning himself by encouraging him to think acting out on children, and there's also the animator.
Okay, wait a minute. We both are aching for him not to have those fantasies. I agree with you, but
you won't call it evil.
I won't call a fantasy evil. There's too much real evil on earth for me to start being preoccupied with people's thinking.
It's not just thinking; it's him masturbating to images of children.
So the real question about the whole pornography issue is not pornography; it's masturbation. There is a Catholic tradition.
I disagree. I think it's both. I think both masturbation is evil, but I think pornography is a greater evil.
Okay, so I don't think masturbation is evil.
We are now joined by David Saltzman, who is a member of the now infamous synagogues in Brooklyn. We've all heard the news story about these tunnels that were discovered underneath this synagogue. And there's a lot of theories going around the internet of about why these tunnels exist, a lot of conspiracy theories, wild accusations going on. So we brought David here as a member of the synagogue to set the record straight of any rumors going around why these tunnels exist.
Police make a wild discovery underneath a synagogue in Brooklyn. An illegal tunnel found below the Chabad Lubavitch World Headquarters in Crown Heights. All right, Fox 5's Lisa Evers takes a look at how it was discovered.
9 men are facing charges this afternoon after police say they dug a secret tunnel into the sanctuary of the Chabad Lubavitch headquarters in Brooklyn.
The men described by police as extremist students are accused of digging the tunnel so that they would be able to have access to the sanctuary after hours. And when a cement truck was brought in to fill that tunnel, the men stood in the tunnel, refusing to leave.
And I want to be clear, there's been conflicting reporting on this story. When I was reading about it recently, there were claims that the tunnel was built specifically to skirt COVID orders that closed down religious buildings and that people wanted to continue worshiping. And so they needed a secret pathway or passageway into the synagogue. But I don't think that's really what's going on here. So why was the secret tunnel built in the first place? This is where it gets complicated.
There was one more viral image going around, and this is the one everyone's been talking about. Is this, Dirk just pulled up on screen, stained mattress that was pulled out of the tunnel being carried by members of the synagogue. So there's a lot of crazy conspiracy theories. I don't want to go down any tasteless rabbit holes. But David, if you could, explain why was there a mattress in the tunnels and what is this stain? A lot of folks are wondering, is this stain feces?
No, it's not feces.
What
the
is
stain
it?
is blood, and basically we did rituals. I said that before. There were some rituals that we do in the tunnels, and sometimes the rituals might involve someone who recently died, and we'll bring him down there, and we're trying to do a ritual to bring back the Messiah, which is a Schneerson, if you heard about him on the news. So he died many years ago.
Looking with lust is not a sin in Judaism.
What's the stance on pornography?
So pornography, when I'm asked this question...
Just to put you on the spot.
You did indeed. Okay, so my answer, when it's raised on my radio show, I have a male-female hour, and I'm very open about sexual subjects. I always ask if a wife calls me and says, my husband looks at pornography, I found on his computer, I have one question. How is your life of intimacy with your husband? Is it good? In other words, is the pornography in lieu of you or in addition to you? Mm-hmm. And I know this is not a religious answer, and I'm not even giving a religious answer. I'm giving what I think is a moral and realistic answer. Men want variety. And if adultery is a substitute for, if pornography is a substitute for one's wife, it's awful. If it's a substitute for adultery, it's not awful. That is my unpredictable answer.
Well, there is a clinical rule of thumb that's akin to that, I would say. If you're trying to decide clinically whether someone's partaking in a habit, say use of alcohol, has reached the threshold of clinical significance, one of the things you do is ask the person you're assessing, is it interfering with your employment? Has it got you in trouble with the law? Is your family complaining? Does it stop you from doing other things that you should be doing? And so the judgment isn't the use of the forbidden substance itself. It is in some sense consequentialist. And I'm not saying that that's an absolute, but it is a hallmark of clinical judgment.
The reality is the ADL was born out of a Jewish Freemason organization known as B'nai B'rith. Now, you're on my book club, you know this, but Sigmund Freud was a member of B'nai B'rith. We were discussing, we're reading right now the book, The Assault on Truth, and Sigmund Freud is very relevant. You have to learn the history of Sigmund Freud. He's in all of our schools, all of our universities, taught as a hero, the history of the psychoanalytic movement. Look, the reality is, him and all of his homies were covering up for incestuous child abuse. That is a fact, okay? They can't wipe that stain away. Quite literally, the way that they did this was through the mechanism of gaslighting. That's what he is the father of, public gaslighting, okay? That's what modern psychology is. They moved to instead diagnose people who were being abused, right? They were using their credentials, I'm a this, I'm a that, to make people, maybe the wider public, believe that their gaslighting was actually legitimate. That is what the book, The Assault on Truth, unpacks. It is therefore a must read because you have to realize how horrific the crimes were that were being committed that they were covering for. So Sigmund Freud was in B'nai B'rith, and the ADL was born out of B'nai B'rith. Why? Well, because they put the organization together to defend a pedophile and a murderer. His name is Leo Frank. Leo Frank was an unbelievably wealthy Jewish factory owner down in Atlanta. And this is 1913. It's very relevant. You should know this happened in 1913. And this is the American South. You know what was going on there. And Mary Fagan was a 13-year-old girl who worked at his pencil factory. She was found brutally raped. Okay, she's a Catholic girl, by the way. I'm going to say that. She was a young Catholic girl. And Leo Frank, even with all of his money, all of his connections, the best lawyers that money could buy, connections all the way to the Supreme Court, he was so guilty of what happened that despite the fact that he tried to pin it on a poor black janitor.
Let me tell you a story about the ADL, Kanye West, and Adidas. As we all watched in recent weeks, the world-famous Kanye West unleashed torrents of anti-Jewish hate, both online and offline, on social media and in interviews. And as that happened, ADL, we do what we do, we sprang into action. Our researchers tracked how Kanye was cheered by extremists, from the Nation of Islam to the Proud Boys to neo-Nazi leaders. And many brands like Balenciaga and Gap, MRC, creative artists, many others, said that Kanye's values weren't their own. And as he unraveled, they cut ties. In many cases, they took losses of millions of dollars because of those decisions. But Adidas was silent. So I called the chairman of Adidas, and he gave me a list of reasons as to why he couldn't act. Now look, I've worked at some big companies. I get the politics, and I understand the pressure. So I told him, hey, we will work with you, and we will praise you if and when you do the right thing. But until you do, ADL will hammer you as hard as we can.
Number of witnesses testified against Leo Frank's wandering hands. An alarming number of witnesses would claim that Leo Frank had a problem with harassing young women at the workplace. Some advocates of Frank's innocence have argued that this testimony was largely tittle-tattle, exaggerated statements designed to portray Frank as a pervert capable of murdering a teenage girl who spurned his advances. In 1913, Atlanta, as with the rest of the South, Jews were a relatively well-integrated and accepted part of the community. The Jewish community were regarded as part of the white population.
The Jews, those who call themselves Jews today and live in Israel, they have created their narrative.
Anti-Semitism was rare in Atlanta. In this context, it does not seem very likely that so many white Atlantans would be willing to commit perjury to see a fellow white man go to the gallows instead of any of the several black suspects that were also arrested by the police. See, Negroes, on the other hand, we were treated as third-class citizens. Negroes were stripped of many civic and legal rights, segregation, vilified, and often subjected to brutal violence and oppression. Most of the thousands of lynchings that occurred in this period were of black men, often killed if there was even a suspicion that they had attempted to engage in relations with a white woman. See, Leo Frank's defense team did not even attempt to cross-examine any of the teenage girls that testified at the trial that Leo Frank had made sexual advances to them.
Here's another key point about the trial of Leo Frank. This is coming from the Leo Frank Case Research Library. It says, after questioning witnesses, carefully reviewing and meticulously deliberating over inquest testimony and grand jury evidence, a grand jury of 21 men, including 4 Jewish members, indicted Leo M. Frank unanimously, 21-0, on Saturday, May 24th, 1913, exactly 4 weeks after Mary Fagan was murdered. The Frankite smearmongers like Dinnerstein and Alfin are essentially making anti-Jewish blood libel smears against one of the most progressive and greatest statesmen of 20th century Georgian history, and claiming Hugh Dorsey was anti-Semite. And so twisted as a racist, he would rather see an innocent white Jew convicted for a crime he did not commit than a guilty African-American pedophile, rapist, murder.
Even in the segregated South, where people were just like, hey, give us any reason and we will go lynch a black person, the racist segregated South, they still found him guilty, okay? They still found Leo Frank guilty, and so much has been written to try to obscure this still. They are still trying to defend Leo Frank. What happened then is that his buddies over at the Freemasonic Lodge, B'nai B'rith, assembled the ADL to gaslight the public. No, Leo Frank wasn't guilty. Look what happened after. He was lynched for what he did to Mary Fagan. He is actually a victim of anti-Semitism. That's it. He wasn't guilty. I'm sure maybe the black guy did it in 1913 Atlanta, and everyone conspired to instead attack a wealthy factory owner. Like I said, to this day, they are using those mechanisms to try to gaslight us and to pretend that Leo Frank was really the victim in this tragedy. It's utterly demented. I will never let it stand. He killed Mary Fagan. He is still guilty of that crime, no matter how much the ADL tries to obscure that.
I hung up the phone, and I knew to get that done, it wasn't about me or us. We had to turn to all of you. Adidas needed to hear directly from the people who buy their shoes and wear their workout clothes. So ADL launched a campaign, #RunAwayFromHate, to use social media to raise awareness of their inertia. And almost 20,000 of you directly lobbied the company. You posted, you tweeted, you emailed, you clicked, and you helped. First, the media took notice, and stories started to spread about their inaction. Then the markets took notice. Adidas' stock price dropped 23% over the month. And then Adidas took notice. Instead of just keeping their relationship with Kanye West under review, they put it on ice and terminated it. And look, while I wish they had done it sooner, Adidas, to their credit, made it abundantly clear that they would not do business with bigots. And today I am so pleased that they're here at Never Is Now to announce an incredible commitment that demonstrates their dedication to fighting anti-Semitism, to addressing hate, will last long beyond this moment. And if you haven't noticed, I am styling some very nice new sambas that I bought last night.
Here's another interesting fact about this whole situation. Mary Fagan was murdered on April 26, 1913. That year, Passover began on Monday, April 21st, Feast of the Unleavened Bread on April 22nd, and ended on Monday, April 28th. Is it simply a coincidence that this murder occurred during the Passover? Does it give validity to the blood libel accusations in which it's believed that matzah bread was made from children's blood during the Passover? After all, she was only 13 years old.
And yes, they perform rituals. That is not an imagination, it's not a conspiracy. The only conspiracy are those that are colluding to hide those facts. . 'Cause 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 'c
Is there any validity to the 1948ers being Satanist? Are there any documented proof that substantiates Candace Owens' claim? The video clip you just watched is titled Romance of a People, Babies Sacrificed to Idol Molech. This event occurred at the Chicago's World Fair in 1933. It was a Jewish historical pageant in which over 150,000 Jews were present and participated in this demonic ceremony. Should we be surprised at this Molech child sacrificial ritual? Should we be surprised seeing an image of Molech seated on a throne, and to add insult to injury, the tablets of the Ten Commandments behind the idol? I'm going to prove to you that this is what Judaism promotes. Let's start with the following source by R.J. Zoe Werblowski and Jeffrey Wigeter, the Oxford Dictionary of the Jewish Religion entry defining Molech and the worship of Molech. It reads, Molech, Semitic deity worshipped in biblical times, known from Ugaritic and Mesopotamian sources as Molech. It is likely that Molech figured among the Chthonic gods, that is, those associated with death and the underworld. According to biblical tradition, Molech was worshipped by means of child sacrifice, a practice abhorred and strictly forbidden by Israelite belief and law. Child sacrifice is condemned in the Bible, without mention of the god Molech, as a characteristically repulsive form of Canaanite religion to be shunned by the Israelites. Explicit prohibitions against the worship of Molech are found in Leviticus chapter 18 verse 21 and chapter 20 verses 2 through 5. Sacrificing to Molech is called whoring after him. It desecrates God's name and pollutes his sanctuary. The penalty is death by stoning for the perpetrator and all of his followers. If the court fails to carry out the sentence, the perpetrator and his family are liable to divine punishment. Let's revisit a key deceptive quote from this source. Child sacrifice is condemned in the Bible without mention of the god Molech. This sentence is deceptive by construction. This wording creates a false separation that the Torah itself does not make. The deception is in the phrase without mention of the god Molech. This entry subtly suggests that some child sacrifice is condemned generically, but Molech-specific worship is a different or narrower issue. The Bible condemns child sacrifice, and when it names Molech, it is naming the same act, not a different category. Let's see if we can confirm whether or not the Bible omits Molech when it condemns child sacrifice. Leviticus chapter 18 verse 21 says, And thou shalt not let any of thy seed pass through the fire to Molech, neither shalt thou profane the name of thy Elohim. I am Yahweh. I just read from the King James Bible version, but let's confirm this with the Tanakh. And thou shalt not give any of thy seed to set them apart to Molech, neither shalt thou profane the name of thy Elohim. I am Yahweh. Let's go to another rabbinical source to further prove that Judaism allows the worship and sacrificing to Molech. Let's go to the Talmud Sanhedrin 64a. It says, Mishnah, he who gives of his seed to Molech incurs no punishment unless he delivers it to Molech and causes it to pass through the fire. If he gave it to Molech but did not cause it to pass through the fire or the reverse, he incurs no penalty unless he does both. Gemara, the Mishnah teaches idolatry and giving to Molech. Our Abin said, our Mishnah is in accordance with the view that Molech worship is not idolatry. For it has been taught, if one causes his seed to pass through the fire, whether to Molech or to any other idol, he is liable to death. Our Eleazar, son of our Simeon, said, if to Molech, he is liable, if to another idol, he is not. What the Mishnah is doing with the quote, he who gives of his seed to Molech incurs no punishment unless he delivers it to Molech and causes it to pass through the fire. This entry, and more specifically, this quote introduces a double technical requirement, delivery to Molech and passing through fire. If only one occurs, then there's no penalty. The more serious problem is, in the Gemara, is this quote, our Abin said, our Mishnah is in accordance with the view that Molech worship is not idolatry. This is the critical line. It explicitly states that one rabbinic position holds, Molech worship is not idolatry. That is a direct theological reclassification. The real shift taking place in Sanhedrin 64a The Torah frames the offense as an absolute betrayal of Yahweh. The Mishnah reframes the offense as a narrowly defined cultic crime with procedural requirements. The Gemara then goes further and states openly, Molech worship is not idolatry. This is not an accurate interpretation of Leviticus. It is a blatant deception by way of reclassification. Not only does Judaism, by way of the Talmud, endorses the worship and sacrifices to Molech, but this religious system promotes the usage of charms by way of eggs. Sanhedrin 101a reads, quote, our rabbis taught it is permitted to consult by a charm the spirits of oil or eggs, but that they give false answers. Incantations are made over oil contained in a vessel, but not in the hand. Therefore, one may anoint with the latter, but not with the former.
And now we can really stick our noses down at them. And no, I want to be clear, this is not Judaism. This isn't your grandma's Judaism. It's a cult mysticism. That's the way that it's able to move through seemingly all the faiths, right? Aleister Crowley. Well, how could you have the Star of David once upon a time, what was it, before 1914, that was the flag of Morocco? That's weird. That's not a Jewish nation. What does it actually symbolize? Occult mysticism. That's why it's on the cover of Aleister Crowley's books. If you're going to perform magic and rituals. And yes, sorry guys, gotta wake up. It's a Monday. We gotta get you there. They deem children to be a necessary part of their initiation rituals.
What does the Talmud say about pedophilia? In the case of a male child, a young one is not regarded as on a par with an old one, but a young beast is treated as an old one. What is meant by this? Rob said, pederasty with a child below 9 years of age is not deemed as pederasty with a child above that. Samuel said pederasty with a child below 3 years is not treated as with a child above that. What is the basis of their dispute? Rob maintains that only he who is able to engage in sexual intercourse may, as the passive object of pederasty, throw guilt upon the active offender, whilst he who is unable to engage in sexual intercourse cannot be a passive subject. But let's go to the footnote to better explain what I just read. This is the footnote 54b. The reference is to the passive subject of sodomy. As stated, Super 54a, guilt is incurred by the active participant even if the former be a minor. An example, less than 13 years old. Now, however, it is stated that within this age, a distinction is drawn. So what is the age of distinction? Footnote 24. It says, Rob makes 9 years the minimum, but if one committed sodomy with a child of a lesser age, no guilt is incurred. Samuel makes 3 the minimum. You see what it's saying here? One rabbi says 9 years is the minimum, but another one says, but if one committed sodomy with a child of a lesser age, no guilt is incurred. But another rabbi says 3 is the minimum. And then we would look at 25. At 9 years, a male attains sexual matureness. 26. The point of comparison is the sexual matureness of woman, which is reached at the age of 3. Wait a minute. Sexual matureness of a woman is at the age of 3. According to their Talmud, an adult man and woman are allowed to have sexual intercourse with kids. Ketubah 11b, a small boy who has intercourse with a grown-up woman makes her as though she were injured by a piece of wood. When I said it before Samuel, he said injured by a piece of wood does not apply to flesh. Some teach this teaching itself as to a small boy who has intercourse with a grown-up woman. When a grown-up man has had intercourse with a little girl, or when a small boy has intercourse with a grown-up woman, or when a girl was accidentally injured by a piece of wood, in all these cases, that's how they treat it, like she has a splinter. If she has intercourse with a little boy, I'm not even gonna say intercourse, molesting a child, a little boy, they say they're gonna treat it like she has a splinter. It means this: when a grown-up man has intercourse with a little girl, it is nothing. For when the girl is less than this, it is as if one puts the finger into the eye. In other words, accidentally poked yourself in the eye. So it's no big deal. But when a small boy has intercourse with a grown-up woman, he makes her as a girl. reduces her to a girl who is injured by a piece of wood. In other words, a girl having a splinter in her hand. Let's see the footnotes. It says, footnote number 1, although the intercourse of a small boy is not regarded as a sexual act. Wait a minute. It's perversion. Although intercourse, no, it's raping, not just no intercourse. It's a raping, it's molesting. Although the intercourse of a small boy is not regarded as a sexual act, nevertheless, the woman is injured by it as by a piece of wood. 6, you see less than 3 years old. We go to 7, an example, tears come to the eye again and again. So does virginity. In other words, it'll come back, she'll grow out of it. So does virginity come back to the little girl under 3 years old. Stuff is sick. This is sick.
This I'm going to read from you is actually a direct quotation from Sigmund Freud, okay? Person that was hailed as a hero. We were in high school and middle school, and he's the father of modern psychology. Yeah, guys, that's kind of the problem. That is kind of the problem, actually. Anyway, to contextualize this, he's writing a letter to his best friend, also the person he was having a gay affair with, who mentored him, Wilhelm Fliess. Now, I should skip to the part and tell you, Wilhelm Fliess also molested his own son, Robert Fliess. Robert Fliess spoke about that when he got older. But Sigmund Freud is writing to Wilhelm Fliess after he gets initiated, because they wait until you're 36 to initiate you into the occult mystic Kabbalah. Okay, I'm going to read you what he writes. He's referring to a patient who he previously hadn't understood before his initiation, who came in and she spoke to him about what she experienced when she was a child. He writes, imagine I obtained a scene, which means a patient was speaking to him about this, about the circumcision of a girl, the cutting of a piece of her labia, sucking up the blood, following which the child was given a piece of the skin to eat. He then fast forwards and he says, I dream therefore of a primeval devil religion whose rites are carried on secretly, and I understand the harsh therapy of the witches' judges. And then he speaks about this. Freud is implying here, by the way, this we are so anti-Semitism proof. This book was written by a guy who was the director of the Freud archives. He read Freud's unpublished works and determined that, yeah, Freud knew that the children were being abused in Vienna, and he created a social science, psychology, to help gaslight those children. This is what you got to be aware of. This is all real. It's not imagined. These are not kooky people on the internet that are telling you this, quite the opposite. And then this guy, Jason Massone, who writes this book, writes that Freud is implying here that the Sabbats were real events, part of a ritualized religion in which sexual perversions were acted out. So he was aware that this was happening. And in case you are not aware, Sigmund Freud, the background story there is wild. All right, he was once an outcast in the very tight-knit, perverted psychology club in Vienna because he told the truth. He went to the morgue. He examined children who had died after they were horrifically murdered and sexually assaulted. And then he also saw patients who were children who were still alive, who were telling him these stories about what they lived through. And he had determined after speaking to these children that they were all telling the truth. And so he gets ostracized from the psychology community. He's like, no, this is actually happening, and it's also incestuous. And they go, get out of here. You can't be with us. You can't publish his paper. Oh no, what would the goyim think? He actually did publish his findings. And like I said, the pervert turned on him. Then remarkably, at the age of 36, he partakes in a ritual during which he's welcomed into the club, and he changes his mind and he writes to Wilhelm Fliess that he now understands. Okay, so that's what I just read to you. Like he now understands what is happening. And that is why you need to wake up and recognize that this is what is happening in our world. And what he's referring to are ancient pagan festivals and ceremonies that center around the earth's cycles of death and rebirth. And so to make this extra clear to you, we are not in a war between monotheistic faiths. The people that we are fighting are effectively pagan gypsies who have been wearing the cloak of Judaism, I would say, since the fall of the missing Khazarian Empire. The Khazars were a nomadic Turkic tribe who adopted Judaism in the 8th century. Now, Freud, this part is important. We're going to get to what's in Epstein's emails because, man, if I didn't tell you guys the truth, Freud himself was a racist, okay? He was a part, like I said, of the Freemason group B'nai B'rith, which had, if you don't know what B'nai B'rith is, you got to wake up, especially if you're in America, okay? That lodge, it's Jewish supremacists. They had everything to do with the Civil War in America. They excel at creating the false dialectic, the North versus the South, the left versus the right. Ulysses S. Grant notoriously expelled Jews from his military district, Tennessee, Mississippi, Kentucky. Do you think he was just like what, another white supremacist? Everyone's just a white supremacist. I mean, another, they would have called him a white supremacist, or he was anti-Semitic. Everybody's just anti-Semitic. No, this had everything to do with what they were cooking up at these lodges, B'nai B'rith. That then subsequently became the ADL after the ritualistic murder of a Catholic girl named Mary Fagan.
What's your thoughts? Please be respectful with your comments. Also, please click the like, click the notification bell, and subscribe to this channel.
Listen, Genesis chapter 11 verse 10 explains the genealogy of Shem. Shem was a black man in Africa. If you repeat this back, Genesis 14 verse 13, Abraham steps on the scene. Being a descendant of Shem, which is a fact, means Abraham too was Abraham, born in the city of a black man called Nimrod, grandson of Ham. Ham had 4 sons. One was named Canaan. Here, let me do some explaining. Abraham, Isaac was Jacob had 12 sons. For real, and these were the children of Israel, according to Genesis chapter 10. These were the children of Israel, according to Genesis chapter 10. These were the children of Israel, according to Genesis chapter 10.